Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. This is Brandy Fluker-Oakley, candidate for state representative in the Suffolk 12th, here to bring you another Tuesdays for the 12th, where we will talk about an important issue in our community. Today's topic is all about transportation, which I know for those of you in the Suffolk 12th know this issue very well and intimately. Excited to have Jarrett Johnson join us for this segment of Tuesdays for the 12. Jarrett, please introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background with us.
Sure. So I'm Jared Johnson. I'm the executive director of Transit Matters. Transit Matters is a transportation advocacy group that tries to bring together, um, equity, but also, good transportation planning. And really, sometimes we work with the T, sometimes we're sort of pushing them to be better. But yeah, we really try to center, technical advocacy, but also, really make it people centered. And I've got a background in political organizing. I worked on a number of political campaigns before, and then I also have a background in some community organizing and housing before I got into this role a little more than a year ago.
That's awesome. Jared, thank you so much for sharing your background and again for being with us this evening. I really
Or
loved what you shared about equity. And we all know, and there's been many conversations. I think even Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley has mentioned this recently, and certainly a city councilor, Michelle Wu, as well, about how transit access truly is a equity issue throughout our community here in Massachusetts and, of course, nationwide in particular. Can you just, for those who might not be familiar about why equity or why transportation is an equity matter, can you just share a little bit with the people how those two correlate?
Yeah, transportation is often said to be one of the biggest factors in someone's success in life. And if you think about it, it's that if someone wants to get better skills, not saying that it's not difficult, but there are programs out there. There are programs to help you pay for college, all of those sort of things. But if you're in a neighborhood that doesn't have good transit access,
Mm.
there's without leaving that community and possibly being cut from your support system, and then the challenge of finding housing here in Boston. No one person can do something on transit, and so transit really is what can connect folks to good healthcare, to good jobs, to good education, and also just to the cultural thing. So, really, transportation access is one of the biggest, components of equity, and I think it's one that is often understated.
Yeah, thank you so much for making that connection and correlation plain for those who might not be familiar. And I know that before you were at Transit Matters, you did some work in Codman Square, which is not that far from us here in the Suffolk 12th. And so I know you have a deep knowledge, particularly for those who live south of downtown or south of the city center, as I like to call it, on how transportation impacts us. Can we zoom in a little bit and talk about these southernmost parts of Boston proper and the surrounding towns? And the impact of transportation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely large parts of the Suffolk 12th. There's not the best transportation access. Either buses that are stuck in crowded traffic, or the Fairmount line, which I think we'll talk about later. That while it's gotten a lot better, it still leaves some room to be desired in terms of the gaps that happen in the middle of the day, and also transportation. Is not just about obviously what I focus on is on public transit, so buses and trains and so on and so forth. But it's also walking and cycling, and there are some particularly dangerous intersections in and around the Suffolk 12th that that have really hurt our community. Black and brown folks are more likely to be hit by a car or to be hit while they're on their bike. And then, of course, there are some folks who need to drive, and really making sure that because the better transportation system is about making the road network better for everybody. Sorry, making the transportation system better for everybody. And so that includes making it safer for drivers, because that's also something that a lot of times disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities. So yeah, like I said, it's there are some transit assets in the Suffolk 12th, but there's still that question about service. There's still a question about affordability, and for some, $5 a day for the commuter. Sorry, $5 a day for the subway and perhaps more, depending on where you are for the commuter rail, can be a major impediment, especially for those on the far of our ends of the low income spectrum.
Yeah, Jared, thank you for naming how transportation isn't just about buses and trains, which is how most of us think about it, but also pedestrian access and for cyclers as well. Cyclists, I should say, as well. I actually, my mom's dear friend, who is like an auntie figure to me, in our community, mom's friend, we call them auntie. They've been around, known you since you were born. She tragically was actually hit by a motor vehicle here in the Suffolk 12 while trying to get to and from her apartment and did not survive those injuries. And I know that particularly even along Cummins Highway as well. In the Suffolk 12, there have been a lot of pedestrian involved incidences as well. So I just want to elevate that because it certainly is true for us here in the Suffolk 12. And you mentioned the Fairmount line. So let's go ahead and just talk about it now. That line has the potential to be a real game changer for residents in the Suffolk 12th and really connect us to meaningful job opportunities downtown and in the seaport and other points north. What opportunities exist to strengthen that service for our community?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is that the T's board voted last year because of a lot of organizing from really across the whole Metro Boston region to really transform our commuter rail network, and they named the Fairmount line as one of the 3 lines that they were really going to prioritize. But that board can sort of set policy, but they don't have any they don't have capital money. They can't just with a pen sign and put millions of dollars into that project. And so that's something that the legislature is going to have to play a role in, looking at our federal delegation as well. But there's really the opportunity to electrify that line, and that has the benefit, of course, of removing diesel pollution out of the air, which is a really harmful thing and is actually correlated to COVID right now. Diesel fumes and fumes from cars, but also that the fact that it's electric makes the train much more reliable and also faster. Our estimate is that if the trains were electrified, you would be able to get from Reedville to downtown in about 18 minutes, whereas now that 30 minutes. So there's an opportunity there. One thing that's really great that has already happened, but we need to make sure the community shows up to use it so that it stays permanent, is now there are 8 extra trips a day on the train, and you're now able to use your Charlie card. So you are now able to tap in on the platform and use your Charlie card and get a free transfer when you get downtown. You can transfer to the red line, or if you jump off at other places, say around Newmarket, you're able to catch the bus and do a free transfer. And that's something that was not offered before a few weeks ago. So, there's great opportunities that way. There's still some access for those with limited mobility. Needs to happen at Fairmount and at Reedville. And so there's a great opportunity there, perhaps for perhaps some transit-oriented development, particularly, transit-oriented development that includes affordable and low-income units. And that could be an opportunity where that developer, while they're doing the construction there on that site, could do some improvements to the station. That's actually happening at the Upham's Corner stop. An affordable housing developer is going to be adding a brand new entrance to the Upham's Corner station.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jared, for sharing that. And I know electrify is often a policy term, so I appreciate you breaking that down for those who might not be familiar on the benefits of what electrifying a line could actually do for us in the community. And you've already seamlessly transitioned to the next question that I had for you. And it's really about the intersectionality of housing, racial justice, economic development, the environment, healthcare, education, and transportation. And all of those are connected. And I'm just curious to know, from your vantage point, what are the ways that you see transportation as an intersectional issue?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest ones is jobs. We're in this. We're heading for almost certainly a recession. Could be a depression. So there's going to be a lot of folks out of work. And one of the great things about transit infrastructure is it creates a lot of jobs. But one of the things we have to do, though, is ahead of that. We're about knock on wood, optimistically, a year and a half away from, and that's very optimistically, from breaking ground on trying to electrify the Fairmount line and trying to build those new trains. So what we need to start thinking now about what is the pipeline to get folks into the trades, you know, to get them into a pipeline for those jobs. So, you know, it's about direct jobs in terms of folks who are going to run the train and who are going to build the improvements. But it's also about connecting folks. You know, you talked about connections to the seaport and to downtown. You know, there's actually a line that runs from just north of JFK to directly to the seaport. And right now they're using that to test the new red line cars. But in a couple of years, that line will be empty, but it'll have been, you know, upgraded and everything will be nice and new on it. I think there's a great opportunity for buses and for train connections to JFK, where then folks can hop on a special shuttle that will take them directly to the seaport. So then opening up tons of jobs with a one or two seat ride. You know, and then as you talked about with with um, healthcare and wellness and that thing. I mean, it's just like we talked about earlier when it comes to walking and pedestrian access. You know, one of the things that really hurts you know, Black and brown communities is a lack of safe walking infrastructure, and not only in terms of just like the present danger of you know, vehicular collisions and things like that, but also just lack of opportunity to walk and to exercise, and to incorporate that into your you know, into your daily life. You know, one of the things that I think could be really interesting to come out of COVID is to look at how we can think about land use a little bit differently, and how we can have it so that you know, I think in an ideal situation, you know, but not crazy ideal, is that every community should have within a 15-minute walk, maybe a little bit further, you know, if folks have a bike or whatever, but you know, that you should be able to have most of your core needs in a 15-minute walk. That you should be able to go, you know, get most of your groceries, you know, pick up some prescriptions at the pharmacy, that there will be job opportunities, you know, within that walk. And, you know, that cuts down on traffic congestion because, you know, while, you know, getting to the train back and forth to work is important, work trips only make up about 12% of our trips. So there's still another 88% of our trips that are for little daily errands. And so if we could do that, not having to use a car, you know, again, like that cuts down on traffic, but it also gives you an opportunity for exercise, gives you an opportunity to really experience, you know, your community in a different way. You know, if you're in a car zipping through the neighborhood, you're really not experiencing the neighborhood in the same way. And I mean, to a lesser extent, the bus and train. But it, you know, at least in those circumstances, most folks are walking, you know, to the station or whatever else. And it's also a great opportunity for economic development. I mean, you know, there are so many, you know, in a lot of places there are, you know, shuttered storefronts, or, you know, perhaps, you know, a few too many liquor stores and cash, you know, and check cashing, and you know, that's a part of the ecosystem. But when you have a business district that makes up a sizable percent of it, you know, there's some room for growth there. And you know, finally, I think it also ties in with that economic development about you know, if you have more folks on the street, you know, walking, you know, to go to the grocery store, to go wherever else, they're also walking by these storefronts. So then you're putting foot traffic in front of that, and then you're creating an opportunity for more small businesses to pop up. So yeah, I think, you know, it's you know, obviously, you know, COVID has been terrible, but I hope that we're able to think about what kind of world do we want to go to, because I don't think going back to normal, going back to crippling traffic, unreliable MBTA service, you know, people still having issues with balancing childcare and work and all of those sort of things. You know, I think there's hopefully a way that we can think about, like you said, how all of these things intersect and how we can build a better world from that.
Yeah, definitely. And I love how you're thinking about these as an ecosystem, because I think all of us here in the Suffolk 12th recognize the interconnectedness of our daily life activities and having access to them. And I really want to drill down on a comment you made, Jared, about looking at land use and COVID recovery in particular. What are the other transportation related matters that we should be looking to as we recover from COVID-19?
Yeah. Buses, you know, buses, I think buses don't get us, they don't get enough love. And I have to always make sure in my organization that, you know, as much as we really, really care about regional rail and as transformative as that project is, that we don't forget about the workhorse of the system. Buses actually carry more people than any other, you know, individual line. and so they really are like so the workhorse of the community, and they're flexible, right? If for some reason Ashmont were to not be a core part of the neighborhood, it would be kind of it'd be kind of screwed a little bit because the red line goes there, and it's not going to be very easy to move that around. But buses are flexible and they're able to move and to shift as different parts of the community grow. But one of the things we have to do is we really have to be intentional on making sure that our buses work well, because as of right now, Black riders spend about 64 more hours on the bus than their white counterparts. And that's because it's stuck in traffic. We still have a very antiquated fare system where folks have to line up at the front and put the cash in and all of that. And we don't have some of the sort of really things that have basic sort of things that have been used in Asia, Europe, Africa, Latin America for years. That things that allow the bus to talk to the street light and allow it to make sure that it doesn't get held at red lights. Making sure that you put the bus stop on the far side of the intersection so you don't pick up people and then have to wait at the red light. There are things like that. There are a million little things like that can make bus service better, and that's both the challenging part, but also the exciting part is that for the bus, it's by and large not a big shiny thing that you cut the ribbon for. It is little small tweaks that you can do them a little bit at a time, and they continue to make the bus service better. And I think one of those things is you really need strong political leadership that is about seeing the whole picture and not just um, cutting a ribbon at a new station. That's wonderful. But there are so many other things that make people's lives better, and that could be just moving that bus stop. Changing that traffic signal so that it connects with the bus, or even things like just regular preventative maintenance. That can make people's lives better.
Yeah, Jared, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think we all know buses are a part of the ecosystem as it relates to public transportation. And I can say, as a Boston native, I have varied memories and experiences as it relates to riding the bus. And so I think the statistic you pointed out on how Black and Brown communities actually spend more time on the bus than other communities also relates to where those access to rail lines were. And so thinking about equity, not only strengthening our buses, and I love all that you said about have the bus talk to the traffic light or place the bus stop at a place where it doesn't get stuck at the red light after picking up the passengers, certainly increase time, increase efficiency, and make the bus system more reliable, which our residents desperately need. And we want to make sure that we have equitable access to rail lines wherever possible, recognizing where those lines have historically been placed throughout the city of Boston. That's some great stuff, Jared. As we look to recover from COVID-19 and, of course, finance these transportation initiatives that will make our community more equitable, there's a lot of talk around various taxes, other initiatives, etc., that's happening in the legislature right now. What are you following most closely, and why?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things we're following closely. I think one of the really good ones is a regional ballot initiative. So that allows folks to vote in. Most cases it's like a half cent or 1 cent sales tax. And in some communities that's not gonna generate a lot, but in Boston, it's really going to generate quite a bit. And I think of course, it's never, no one's ever excited about paying an extra penny on something, but it's as long as that's part of a larger suite of things, I think it can be a good idea. And especially if you make sure that the money is distributed equitably, and that means that a lot of that sales tax money is probably going to come from downtown and Back Bay, but making sure that it gets spent in the communities that most often get left out of the conversation. I think that's going to be a part of it. I think there's some talk about corporate tax reform that's happening in the state house that I think is a great idea, because while I do think that it makes sense to have a significant portion of the money's coming from transportation, because that's who's using the system, and because it makes the case stronger for, obviously, if you're raising money on a toll, then it should go into transportation versus, other kinds of ways to raise money that, are going to set up a fight about who gets that money. But again, I do think that companies, should pay into the system. There was a analysis done by um, a group that worked with Better City that said that the T adds about $11 billion of impact annually.
Wow.
And a big portion of that goes to the firms that use, that their employees use the T, that their trucks, use the highways that have the capacity that they have only because the T exists. And so I think it's right that they should pay into that. I do think that we have to have the conversation. It's not popular, but we have to have the conversation about road usage fees, and what does that look like? Because right now the amount of money that we pay for our roads, especially on the federal level, it does not, the general taxes that pay for that go to that fund have not paid for what we need. And so that's a serious conversation. And I think there are ways to make it more equitable in terms of rebates, to low income drivers. But it does also force us to have a conversation about that during the times where where a road congestion fee would be the most expensive, only about 3 to 5% of the people on the road at peak hours are low income. So that's something that we've got to consider. But like I said, ultimately I think it's really going to have to be a suite. I don't think there's one silver bullet, and I think you have to consider that that there are some of these policies that could have a regressive element to it, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, because it's only regressive for a segment of the population, and there's other parts of the population that it is, it's going to be a blip. And so it's like, okay, well, how do we surgically dig in on the ways in which it's regressive, and how do we mitigate that, but how do we still bring new monies into the transportation system, because we absolutely need it every which way. And that's whether you're a driver and you care about having no potholes on the road, or whether you're a bus rider who wants a reliable bus, or whether you're a transit rider who wants to see the Fairmont line getting electrified. There's got to be new monies into the system. And one really stark figure is that bus fares and commuter rail fares and subway fares have gone up between about 400 to 500% over the last 30 years, and the gas tax has gone up about 14%.
Yeah.
So, right, like I said again, nobody, clearly not going to be the most popular guy at the party by saying, yes, there's some new taxes that are needed, but we do have to be honest with ourselves about the need and about who has been paying the bulk of the burden.
Yeah. Jared, thank you so much for pointing that out. And, many of us know here in Massachusetts, we do have quite the regressive tax system. And I think a lot of advocates, including myself, and I know you as well, are looking at how we can make our taxes more progressive. And I think that data point you just shared in the increase in transportation fares to 400 to 500% versus the gas tax to 14% certainly is very telling. What I want to leave us with, and just thinking about as we're wrapping up our time here, is to the viewers in the 12 Suffolk who are watching this now, and even those beyond our district. Do you have a parting message on how they can advocate for more equitable transportation, or any of the initiatives that we've discussed today?
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind immediately. One of them is that the Senate is going to take up legislation probably this week, but it's certainly by next week. And so I think reaching out to your senators and letting them know, hey, this is important. We really need you to act on transportation. That's going to be huge. And there's t4ma.org/ take action. Well, if you go to t4ma.org, it'll be right there on the front page. And then secondly is just keeping an eye out there. I mean, I know it's difficult, but if you're watching this, you're probably civically tuned in. But just keep an eye out for whenever MassDOT and in the MBTA are doing public engagement processes. Those processes are not perfect. They could always be doing more outreach and engagement and things around language access, but they do try to have meetings that are open whenever they are coming up with a capital plan for which highways are going to get remodeled, or which parts of the red line are going to get fixed. Those processes are are always open. And so, really making sure that you make your voice heard in that forum is really important. Most Mondays, it'll be switching to probably a little bit, it'll probably be switching to an every other Monday format, but for the past 5 years, most Mondays of the month, the Tees board has met, and they dedicate anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. I mean, it goes as long as there are people signed up, where they listen to public comment. And you would be surprised because, it's at a slightly inconvenient, or not slightly, it's an inconvenient hour for a lot of folks. But, if folks show up there or they send letters or whatever else, I have seen them actually change their vote, or at the very least amend their vote based on public testimony and public comment that the public is given. So I think never underestimate it. And you know, your state legislators do not hear from a ton of regular folks. They hear from lobbyists and they hear from big companies, but they don't hear from a ton of regular folks. And so even just 3 or 4 folks picking up the phone or sending an email and talking about an issue is enough for them to go, oh, okay, this is something. So I think don't underestimate that.
Yeah, Jared, thank you so much for sharing those ways that we can get involved to ensure we have equitable access to transportation here in the Suffolk 12th and beyond. And I'll just close us out by saying, I've been a lifelong rider of the T since back when the Orange Line was an L train above ground, which is many moons ago now. And I truly understand the importance of equitable transportation, and I will be sure to fight for those equitable initiatives as state rep of the Suffolk 12th. Jared Johnson, thank you again for joining us this evening. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this edition of Tuesdays for the 12.